Hey, it's Val, coming to you from Colorado with a glass of Italian Rosé or Rosato in my hand. So I thought it would be a good time since we're between seasons and we're exploring Italian wine and working our way down Italy's boot. I thought we'd revisit the Rosato episode from way back in season 1. Like I said, Rosato, Italian for rosé wine. It's literally what's in my glass right now. It's a Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo. Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo, from the land of my people. And by the way, not an ad. I hope you can find a glass of Italian rosé to help you wind down your summer, whether it's a lovely dark cherry, almost red Rosato like I'm drinking now, or something on the lighter side. Either way, they are perfect for these late summer evenings, and they pair beautifully with alfresco dining and casual sipping, barbecue, and friends. Cheers. Salute. Welcome to Glass in Session. This podcast is here to help you fortify your wine studies and arm you with wine buying savvy and have some fun doing it. Wine can be an incredible, fun journey, and I'm happy to be part of yours. I'm your host, Val, and I thank you for joining me. Now, I recently opened a beautiful bottle of Italian Rosé from northern Italy to enjoy on the deck in what I thought was going to be the beginning of gardening weather. But no, in late May, there are big, fluffy snowflakes falling from the sky like they mean it. In fact, we had about a foot of snow and it crushed one of my garden covers. But I drink rosé wines like I mean it, so I wasn't going to let the snow or the winter days stop me. And since I like to skirt the topic of pink wines with a little fringe wine flair this season, I thought it would be interesting to highlight some of my favorite rosé wines from Italy. By now, you probably know that I'm seeking out something new and something thrilling every time I open my wallet and my waiter's key. And there are some stories behind these wines that I want to get to. Now, there are hundreds of appellations that produce rosé or rosato wines in Italy, but it wouldn't serve anyone for me to cover them all. And I could do it. I could do it from the Aglianico del Taberno DOCG, the Rosato in Campania, all the way to the Vicenza DOC and the Veneto at the end. But I take that back. I could spend the day reciting them all, and I would giggle like a crazy woman with ecstasy of words like Torgiano, Galioppo, and Chactra, which I did not even know came in rosé. And it would tie my tongue in tantalizing knots of mispronunciations, and I would sip and giggle and sip this Nebbiolo Vespaiola blend in my glass right now some more. Fun for me, not so much fun for you. So instead, I thought we would talk about a few that stand out. They're fun fringe fermentations that you can most likely find. But first, some figures. Again with the Fs, I don't know what that is. As I mentioned, there are literally hundreds of Rosato producing regions in Italy, more than 500 DOPs, including 2 DOCGs and IGPs, and over 220 of those, nearly half, make rosé. Some are dedicated to rosé. This isn't even counting the boloncini, or the sparkling wines, or the dessert styles, which we're going to be covered in future episodes, I guarantee you. Italy produces 10% of the world's rosé wines. That's about 2.5 hectoliters in 2014 out of the global 24.3 million hectoliters produced. Now, I found a 2015 CIVP-OIV report that showed Italy being second in volume production as far back as 2014, which is only 5 years ago, but fifth in consumption. Currently, however, Italy accounts for about 5% of consumption, according to this week's article in Venice by Ian D'Agata. A more recent report now has Italy in third in production after France and Spain, and again, lowest in volume consumption across Europe. This is according to Italy's Istituto del Vino Rosso Autoctono Italiano, or Institute of Italian Autochthonous Pink Wine. I should note that this is hard to measure as many statistical analyses combine red and rosé statistics, but the CIVP and France Agrimer contributed to this effort, and I will link all of this in the show notes in case you want to look at data, because I think it's a good time. But the point is, comparatively, Italy makes a decent amount of rosé wine. They do export it, but they don't drink as much of it as we do. One of my classmates in Italy made an observation in a Tuscan wine bar one night that he didn't even think the Italians liked their own Rosato. Ironically, it was not an easy find back then, and he was judging by the look on the bartender's face when he wanted to try his Rosato, and I wanted to try, I think I was drinking a Lacrima Christi because there was another one I hadn't had before. But the same limp Sangiovese-based rosé kept showing up in our school's Enoteca and wine lab, and it would elicit groans every time the bottle would make an appearance. Now, I'm not going to mention the producer, but let's just say it made a compelling case for the pale, anemic, flavorless plonk theory among young, impressionable wine students, of whom many were not even old enough to drink back in the States. And of course, one cranky 40-something, me, who knew there had to be better, and therefore I had to wonder, if Italy was a top exporter, but a lower tier consumer of rosé, were they exporting all the good stuff? Well, I'm going to start by saying good is relative. That's something I don't like to say. What's a good wine? Well, good is if you like it. And so I never want to bag on anyone's product on this show. But I've since seen the pink light, and although not necessarily the light pink, and that's where we're going to start, because the first Italian rosé that I got really excited about, it was on the Abruzzo pad at Vinitaly in 2010. It was a Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo from the land of my people, and I was so blown away by this wine, but I wasn't allowed to take a picture of the bottle. The producer just wasn't having it, especially if you're a wine blogger, which I was back then. After that, I went around and tasted every one I could get my lips on, and they had me at Cerasuolo. These wines tend to have more intense color, dark cherry red, which is what Cerasuolo means from the local dialect Cerasi, sometimes looking like a light red wine. So that's where we're going to go, to Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo DOC. Now, this is an appellation for just rosé or rosato wines. It must be made from a minimum of 85% Montepulciano grapes, with 15% being other red grapes from the region. You may have heard of Montepulciano d'Abruzzo wine, and at one time this was actually part of a DOC, a singular DOC. But in 2010, the year I was at Vinitaly tasting my first Cerasuolo, it earned its own set of production rules, known as the Disciplinare. And in this Disciplinare, you will find rules for producing the wine, such as aging requirements, zone of production, how to grow the grapes, the density of the vines, how to prune the vines, how to harvest the vines, and how to make the wine. For example, the Rosato must be at least 12% alcohol by volume and cannot be released before January 1st, the year after harvest. I did not know this at the time. There's also a Superiore. For the Superiore, every time you see that on a bottle, chances are the alcohol is going to be at least a half a degree higher. So for the Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo Rosato Superiore, the minimum alcohol by volume is going to be 12.5%, and it cannot be released until March 1st, the year after harvest. Now, all this is in Italian. You got to do a little translating to read the production rules for every DOC, but it's fun for me. Again, not so much fun for you. This brings us to our first cork dork alert. A couple of points. Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo is a rosé, and it shouldn't be confused with the Cerasuolo di Vittoria DOCG, which is a Sicilian red wine made with Nero d'Avola and Frappato. Now, there is a tendency also to confuse the Montepulciano grape of Montepulciano d'Abruzzo wine from the Abruzzo region with the Vino Nobile de Montepulciano DOCG. These are not the same. In Vino Nobile Montepulciano, it's a region and a city. I have a picture of me somewhere sitting at a winery with a city in the background, and this is in Tuscany. This wine is made with 70% Sangiovese, and in this part of Tuscany, the Sangiovese grape is affectionately known as Pugnolo Gentile. But back to Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo. It's a deep pink wine, almost cherry in color, and often as serious in flavor and texture as they are in hue. Spaghetti alla chitarra in a spicy sauce is a favorite moment when I was driving around in Abruzzo a couple years ago. And it's like a square spaghetti. It is. It's a square noodle because they have this wire, it looks like a guitar kind of thing, and they press the pasta through it, and the noodles are kind of square. And there's usually a spicy chili kind of sauce with it. And then with a nice cool rosé, it is something, and it's something I still love to this day. But last year, I was at Crew Artisan College when they came to Denver, a city near me, and I was chatting with Enrico Cerulli, and he swears, because he makes this wine, that the perfect food with the Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo is pizza. I'm not going to argue with that. I love just pretty much anything with pizza. So the next Rosato that really rings my bell, however, is Chiaretto. Chiara actually translates to clear. I remember teachers asking, Chiaro, am I clear? Chiaretto translates to claret. And this was once a moniker for light-colored Bordeaux wines as far back as the 1200s or so. But even today, it's used once in a while, mainly by the British. In fact, last Friday night, I was listening to A Glass With A Glass of with Ollie Smith, where he interviews different celebrities and chefs, and I heard them use the word claret to refer to Bordeaux wines in general. So it is still used today. But a few months after my Cerasuolo encounter so many years ago, I was blown away next by a Chiaretto from Bardolino. And the Bardolino's in the Veneto, of course. But I was in one of my favorite Florentine backstreet wine bars that I would never tell tourists it was located because I didn't want it overrun. And it could have been the happiness of the day, of the moment, because I was back in the town. I had just come back and it was the end of tourist season, but it was still pretty warm. And walking those streets never got old for me. So when that wine memory stayed with me, I knew it had to be something special because I drink a lot of wine when I'm walking around Florence and popping into my wine bars. But this particular Chiaretto was from the Bardolino DOC. It's on Lago di Garda, or Lake Garda's eastern shore, from one of the 16 designated villages that can make this particular wine. The main grape is Corvina, and this Corvina has to make up most of the wine, anywhere from 35 to 80%. And of that percentage, Corvinone can be up to 20%, to which is added between 10 to 40% of Rondinella and a maximum of 15% Molinara. And Molinara you're not going to see so much anymore, at least in the wines of Valpolicella, and that's where you've heard these grapes before. And there's also other red grapes that are authorized, and even then, only 10% is the max that any single variety can comprise of that blend. So if you're thinking, you've heard of those trios before, Corvino, Rondinella, Molinara, oh my, yes, you're thinking of Amarone and Valpolicella, with Corvina being the sweetheart of the three. And oh, by the way, yeah, there's math involved in that. So stay in school, kids. Now for our next Cork Dork alert. There is another Chiaretto from 10 villages on the other side of Lago di Garda in Lombardy. This is called Chiaretta Valtenesi from the Grappolo grape, as well as Marzemino, Sangiovese, and Barbera. In 2011, Valtenesi became its own DOC, covering the wines made with the Grappello from Garda's DOC Classico subzone. That is, until 2017, when Garda Classico subzones, Bresciani DOC, and Valtenesi DOC, they all teamed up to form what is now known as the Riviera del Garda Classico DOC. This leaves Garda DOC also still authorized to produce yet another Chiaretto, but it is a Cabernet Franc-based wine. So there are three Chiaretti there. But back to the Bardolino Chiaretto. This is the one from the Veneto, East Side, like I mentioned earlier. And this wine was a fresh, fruity summer delight on an early fall day over a plate of tonno carpaccio. That's a tuna carpaccio dish with capers, and with it being a hot day and finding this nice, cool dish. I knew I didn't want anything hot, and air conditioning isn't something that's plentiful over there as well. So I wanted a cold dish and an even colder glass of wine. So I usually pick my dish by the wine. I saw the Chiaretto. I ordered the tuna carpaccio with capers, and I'm pretty sure I floated back across the Ponte alla Carraia, the bridge, that day on my way to my favorite gelato place, because that's just what you do. You eat, you walk around. It's just where I find so much pleasure in listening to conversations. But more recent sources than those I spouted earlier indicated that production and even demand of Italian rosé wines like the Chiaretto have increased over the last decade, although worldwide rosé swigging still only accounts for 10% of consumption. Other fun facts? There is no shame in the Rosato game in Italy like we once suspected in our early wine school days. But a lot can change in a decade. Am I right, wine lovers? For example, I mentioned the Istituto del Vino Rosso Autoctono Italiano, or Rosautochtono. This organization was only formed this year to research, advocate for, and educate about these Rosato wines. Well, sign me up, because there are 6 consortii, or governing bodies, forming this one big Consorzio Rosa. It's like a big pink consortium in my fluffy pink mind. And it includes producers from the Chiaretto wines of Bardolino and Valtenesi, and my beloved Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo, and the Ciro wines of southern Italy, as well as the rosé wines of Castel del Monte and Puglia Salice Salentino. If this organization can help Italians drink more and better pink, then maybe we can get it on our shelves here. So I will be watching, and I'll be watching on my pink iPhone, my pink MacBook, and my pink iPad, all wrapped in pink eye cases because it's my favorite color, by the way. So you knew it was going to happen sooner or later, an episode on pink wines. And I promise you, in future seasons, there will be more. On another rosé note, in one of Ian D'Agata's 2015 articles, which is going to be linked in the show notes, he welcomes one of my favorite fringe wines, Ramato, under the Rosato umbrella. Now, Romato translates to coppered, or as an adorable winemaker once said to me at that very same Vinitili venue over a glass of his Romato, he says, "It is a play on words. Romato means copper-colored, but also to have loved. The grapes and the skins, they make a love, but only for one night." So meanwhile, my knees are kind of like weak and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, oh, so it's a one-night stand in a bottle. And of course, he gives me the look like, oh, yes, you're curious. I was the crazy American to him, but I just adored this winemaker. And of course, he was speaking of Pinot Grigio grapes at the time. His wine was actually called Romato. It was made with these Pinot Grigio grapes, which really are more pinky blue in color. And when left on the skins, they create a beautiful copper-colored wine. But I really want to cover these kind of wines in another episode. So while some people call them a pink wine or a rosé, they're made with white grapes, and to me, they're a whole fascinating other subject. But I didn't even know that the Italians were calling this what I called a one-night stand in a bottle, un vino di una notte. This is a wine of one night. What is that? It's a one-night stand in a bottle. We're talking about hours of maceration time, not days, and not the bleeding off of juice or the Sangye method or the extra skin contact that we get with the red grapes. And I really am fascinating with these wines, but I want to keep this session more about the pink wines with the red grapes, specifically those from Bardolino and Abruzzo. And once again, I could pontificate all day about Italian rosé, Chiaretto, Romato, Bardolino, Rosato. But please stop me before I start rapping again. Clearly, the wine is going to my head. Seriously, Val, stop. So to summarize, we talked about Italian rosé wines, or Rosato. And we got into two regions that I find fascinating for some long-established styles. Some can be traced back hundreds of years in Italian literature. But we started in the south, in Abruzzo, with Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo, and we moved north to Bardolino and the Chiaretto. We explored what these wines were, what they can be confused with, and hopefully left you with some mouth-watering options the next time you scan that wall of rosé wine and you see something a little darker that might peek out at you. And if you're into pink as much as may I recommend that as of this recording, in late May 2019, there's a two-part Think Pink series in the May 2019 editions of Venice by Ian D'Agata. That's D''Agata. He's keeping his ears and eyes and nose on the rosé wine market with respect to production and consumption and figures and trends, and as well as other wines in Italy. He is a foremost authority on Italian wines and Italian grapes. But I'll leave you with this quote because I think he says it best in one of these pieces. Rather than drink an insipid so-so wine just because it is from a well-known region or denomination, it is often far better to go looking for the Venice Rosato gems of Puglia, Abruzzo, Veneto, Lombardy, and other regions. And that is from Ian D'Agata. I could not have said it better myself. So I thank you for listening this week and subscribing, and I hope you find some rosy pink cheer in your glass this season, whatever the weather's doing outside. Please feel free to reach out to me between sessions at val@glassandsession.com or on Twitter @WineGalUnboxed. On the Facebook, Pinterest, and Insta Spaces, I'm at Vino with Val. Glass and Session is trademarked by Vino with Val, LLC. Music by Addict Sound. Website is glassandsession.com/podcast.